about?
Sounds like Chuck.
Yeah. What are you talking about, Chuck? He's like, the Syrian refugees. I'm like, what are you kidding me? I'm about to fly to Paris and shoot him in the head myself. I mean,
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country...
You know, a lot of people say this is just because of an election year. But I don't think it's beyond that. It's deeper than that bigotry and xenophobia and, anti-Semitism.
Personal perspectives on bigotry. Ahmed Tharwat and Michael Hindin at our table.
Yeah, it's anti-Semitism recycled.
Yeah.
My father's family died in concentration camps.
Bernie Sanders and a Muslim university student in Virginia, and President Barack Obama in Congress. Minnesotans caucus on March 1st and are getting ready. This is Democratic Visions. Here's Tim O'Brien.
Fears of ISIL-directed terrorism in the United States, brought upon by mass shootings in California, attacks elsewhere, and the recruitment of young Somali men to join ISIL or Shabab have all combined to generate another round of hate talk directed at Arab Americans and Muslims. There have been calls in some parts of the country, but not here in Minnesota, to refuse sanctuary for refugees from Syria. It's not easy being a Muslim or an Arab American these days. We welcome to the table Mike Hindin and Ahmed Tharwat to discuss the situation. Mike is a DFL activist who lives in St. Louis Park. Mike is a son of an immigrant who was born in the Joe McCarthy era. As a matter of fact, his father was dragged before the McCarthy Army hearings to testify. He grew up in a New Jersey town in a hotbed of anti-Semitism. Mike gives back to the community, particularly the Somali community, by helping them understand the political process and how to participate in the precinct caucus system. Ahmed Tharwat is the host of Belladon, a program focusing on Arab American issues that is carried here and on the Minnesota Channel. He regularly writes commentaries for the Star Tribune and several international internet publications.
When I first saw the sign, I said, this is like we are in the 50s, we're in the 60s, and this is like what's going to happen during the slavery and when there was segregation and Jim Crow and all of this. Now, Muslims are the new blacks or the new Jew, whatever the case
it's anti-Semitism recycled.
Yeah.
It's the same things I experienced as a kid in New Jersey. It's the same stuff my immigrant parents put up with. Unfortunately, it seems to be a part of human nature to find someone to blame, someone to fear, and the John Birch Society, which in the 50s was basically if you weren't white Anglo-Saxon Protestant with money, you weren't welcome in the country. Mm-hmm. Well, that kind of died out with Joe McCarthy embarrassing himself on TV, and it's now reappeared with the sons of Fred Koch, who was a founder of the Birch Society, and now it's the billionaires organizing and funding the Tea Party, focusing on the same fear, insecurity. These people are so wild and so disturbed in their thinking and comfort level that they're reaching out for anything that'll give them a feeling of superiority and comfort. So you guys happen to be the next convenient target.
Yeah, and xenophobia and bigotry and racism, as old as apple pie in this country. So it's part of the American character. And I know you said it's a human nature, but I don't think I know it's human nature. That's why we have history, we have education, we have all of that, and we have leaders. And when you look at the Republican debate and the G.O.P., it's like a hate groups or a hate speech, not a debate.
Much so. If you go back to the earliest part of our founding, any new immigrant group, basically once they became comfortable, after being discriminated against, being accused of taking jobs and all the things that you hear, and or being a danger because of their religion or philosophy, that immigrant group, once it settled in, basically tried to shut the gate behind them and nobody else. It happened to the Irish, it happened to Italians, you name it, it's happened. And it's a tragedy because people really, really were stressed and hurt and damaged by these sorts of things.
I mean, I was reading some reports about the rise of anti-Muslims. When the Americans get upset, they go and attack a woman with a hijab, a mosque. It's a religious symbol. If this was about ISIS or Daesh or ISIL, whatever you call it, as Obama says, why can't they burn the ISIS flag? What is about the Americans that they express their anger, express in a religious term? It's the other way around. When it comes to angry Muslims or angry Arabs, they burn the American flag. They go and attack McDonald's or the American embassy. It's a political statement.
I think what has happened is that the people who benefit by having these people angry and disturbed have determined what the targets are. To generalize ISIL and Hamas and any of these groups to 1.6 billion Muslims, most of whom we never hear a thing about because they go about their lives doing what we all do, which is care for our kids and earn a living, and someone determined that that was going to be a very useful target. And I think it's largely because most people don't have a clue how similar Islam is to Christianity, Judaism. I mean, we all talk about Abraham. I think we have a huge amount in common, but somebody's determined that there's enough ignorance out there about Islam that we can turn that into an issue to get people riled up.
A lot of people say this is just because of an election year, but I don't think it's beyond that. It's deeper than that. That bigotry and xenophobia and anti-Semite and also Islamophobia now. Pew Research found out that 30% of the Republican people affiliated with the Republican Party don't mind bombing a town that was in a Disney movie, Aladdin, Agrabah, whatever. That goes 40% if they are Trump supporters. You're talking about millions of people.
Yes.
That's scary stuff.
Very scary.
With all this knowledge and access to Google and social media, all this information available, and still people they want to attack a town because it sounds Arabic.
Yeah. They're appealing to what's called the lizard brain, the part that's survival, that the back of your head. And, that doesn't take any thought. That doesn't allow for much thought. That's quick reaction. Republicans, they picked very specific issues. And it's
cultural issue.
Culture, guns, God, gays, gynecology, abortion. Those 4 or 5 particular issues they picked very carefully because they knew they could get a response. Ahmed, I'm certainly hearing from my Somali American friends fear and trepidation about all this conversation. What are you feeling? What are you getting out of happening to you?
I'm in the public sphere. I'm visible. And try to brush it away or put it aside, but now it's in the back of your head all the time when you go around, when people stepping behind you in a parking lot or in a shopping mall. It really kind of comes as an issue now that you have to struggle with and think about it because of all this news out there. I mean, it seems like the American people want the Muslim to change them, not just the beliefs. I don't think it's a religious issue. I think it's a consumer issue. And it seems like what they see, somebody wearing a hijab, this is an anti-consumer issue. You're not into with the fashion and all of that. And I think, they want us to be like a Muslim light. You say, I'm Sunni, I'm a secular Muslim, I drink, I eat pork. They want us to change, this to become the Muslims that they want in their own image. And I think it's very hard, an average Muslim living in this country, to understand with all the things that we have 6-7 million Muslims in this country, what they have done. They are in the military, they are in the service, they are in all walks of life. You find a Muslim school everywhere, but still we've been accused that we're not assimilated, we have to prove our loyalty, and all the things I think disheartening and disappointing for a lot of Muslims.
Parallel experience with what my parents went through, but you would have thought that, okay, we're in the 21st century, and I can get away with a lot of things because I have what I call camouflage.
Yeah.
I can suppress my cultural heritage, I can suppress my religion, and I can go into a workplace and no one is going to identify who I am unless
You pass as a white person.
I pass as one of them.
Yeah.
And I will hear the most horrible, awful, hateful stuff because they think I'm one of them. But then I had to turn around and honor my parents' legacy and honor my own internal being and saying, wait a minute, where does your Bible say that this hateful stuff is acceptable? And I've been occasionally been very effective at turning their own religion and their own beliefs back at them because they're not practicing them. And that's been a little bit of fun, but I can imagine how horrible it is to be so targeted like my parents were and like I felt as a youngster. It's just...
I remember right after 9/11, the same eve, Charlie Rose was doing a special, and he asked me how this is going to affect the relationship with Muslims in this country, and I was a little bit, taken by the whole tragedy, and I told him, I quoted Winston Churchill, you can always count the Americans to do the right things after they tried everything else. It seems like the learning curve is taking much longer than I thought. It's the same pattern, the same thing. And every time there is a tragedy, a misbehaving Muslim, I have to go out and apologize. I cannot be responsible for 1.5 billion people that are good and bad and all of this. And the idea of connecting our foreign policy to what's going on, it's like it's just overhead a lot of Americans. If the Americans know what we are doing in the Middle East by bombing, by invasion, by causing almost 1.5 million Iraqi deaths, and supporting Arab dictators like Sisi, Mubarak, Gaddafi, all those people are recruiting more terrorists than ISIS itself, jailing journalists, killing people at night and smiling in the daytime. So these are the issues that the American people need to be aware of. If you really want to look at terrorism, stop the things that cause terrorism. Stop supporting dictators. Stop invading and bombing Arab and Muslim country. Stop supporting Saudi Arabia. Stop supporting the Israelis' occupation of the Palestinians. Those are really the main issue that ISIS is using it to recruit terrorism.
Well, it reminds me over and over again of a book called The Ugly American, William Lederer, where we go places and do things and just do not have an inkling of what the culture is. And we go and blunder in the world because we do not take the time to find out what it is that makes people we're going to deal with tick. And
what do they hate us? That kind of silly question.
The trick is to understand them before you do things that make them hate us.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, Japan as an example, you don't go into a Japanese home with your cowboy boots on. The culture is you take your shoes off. How hard is it to learn a little bit of etiquette of how to go into a Japanese home, or a Muslim home, or a Jewish home, or any kind of place that might be a little different than your home? I mean, ask a few simple questions. We don't seem to do that as a country or as a diplomatic organization.
With the growing Islamophobia in this country, if you look at all the Republican candidates, in order to feed into their constituents, they're talking about Islamophobia and are constantly bashing Muslims in the media. Ben Carson, Donald Trump, the biggest bigots. As a Muslim student, as an American Muslim student who aspires to change this world, Thank you. As an American Muslim student who aspires to change the world, currently majoring in international conflict analysis and resolution major, and I hope to be a human rights attorney. Hearing the rhetoric that's going on in the media makes me sick, because I, as an individual, I'm constantly trying to raise awareness and make sure that everyone is treated equally in this country. So, to the next president of the United States, what do you think about that?
This is what I think. This is what I think. Let me be very personal here, if I might. I'm Jewish. My father's family died in concentration camps. I will do everything that I can to rid this country of the ugly stain of racism which has existed for far too many years. And let me tell you something. What racism is about is many, many things. It is pent-up hatred that is lashing out at people in uncontrollable and stupid ways. But it is something very different than that. For many years in this country, you have had politicians, and I'm old enough to know this, who played black off against white. So they told white workers who are earning pennies an hour, they said, hey, you think you're in trouble, but you're better off than the blacks who can't drink at a water fountain or go to your school. And they told straight people, well, you think you got problems, that you're better off than those gay people, right? And they told men against women. We played one group off against another. The rich got richer, everybody else is fighting with each other. Our job is to build a nation in which we all stand together as one people. And you are right. There is a lot of anger being generated and hatred being generated against Muslims in this country. That's absolutely correct. There is hatred being generated against immigrants in this country. And if we stand for anything, we have got to stand together and end all forms of racism, and I will lead that effort as President of the United States.
There's a better way. And that's why we need to reject any politics. Any politics that targets people because of race or religion. Let me just say this. This is not a matter of political correctness. This is a matter of understanding just what it is that makes us strong. The world respects us not just for our arsenal. It respects us for our diversity and our openness and the way we respect every faith. His Holiness Pope Francis told this body, from the very spot that I'm standing on tonight, that to imitate the hatred and violence of tyrants and murderers is the best way to take their place. When politicians insult Muslims, whether abroad or our fellow citizens, when a mosque is vandalized, or a kid is called names, that doesn't make us safer. That's not telling it like it is. It's just wrong. It diminishes us in the eyes of the world. It makes it harder to achieve our goals. It betrays who we are as a country. We the people. Our Constitution begins with those three simple words. Words we've come to recognize mean all of the people, not just some. Words that insist we rise and fall together. That's how we might perfect our union. And that brings me to the fourth and maybe most important thing that I want to say tonight. The future we want, all of us want, opportunity and security for our families, a rising standard of living, a sustainable, peaceful planet for our kids. All that is within our reach. But it will only happen if we work together. It will only happen if we can have rational, constructive debates. It will only happen if we fix our politics. A better politics doesn't mean we have to agree on everything. This is a big country. Different regions, different attitudes, different interests. That's one of our strengths, too. Our founders distributed power between states and branches of government and expected us to argue, just as they did, fiercely, over the size and shape of government, over commerce and foreign relations, over the meaning of liberty and the imperatives of security. But democracy does require basic bonds of trust between its citizens.
These bonds of trust provide a national confidence, regardless of the political bombast and all that political pundit chatter.
There's no question in a very anti-establishment year where anger has seemed to...
number 2 through 7 scored on stage.
But maybe if someone is attacking you, it means you must be doing something right.
Now, you see, when we Americans understand our political and election systems and laws, the politics of fear and big money are marginalized.
A trusted team.
And tonight's focus is Minnesota's open electoral process and leading election system.
A January forum hosted by Hennepin Tech College in Brooklyn Park was in service to that goal.
Is that elections in our state, as opposed to some others, are...
Can anybody tell me how the number of delegates of your precinct is decided?
Think Again Minnesota, a public interest nonprofit, spearheaded the event. The message: when citizens become informed, help select candidates through a political party, and show up at the polls, the vote is powerful. On hand were Brooklyn Park City Clerk Devin Montero, League of Women Voters Officer Kirsten Comey, and DFL activist Hollis Winston and G.O.P. activist Robert Marvin. Minnesota Secretary of State Steve Simon, political consultant Benjamin Cruz, and House District 60B candidate Mohammed Noor began the workshop.
You have to build a team, a trusted team.
Noor described how candidates for the state legislature win support.
And when you're on the front, you get yeas and you get nays.
Cruz described Minnesota's unique political party caucus and convention system.
And be one of those election judges, be trained, be professional.
Number one is culture. That's the reason.
Simon identified Minnesota's political culture, election laws, and confidence in its electoral system for high voter turnouts. For general elections, we regularly lead the nation.
We err on the side of participation. And our tradition in Minnesota, across party lines, most of the time, has been to err in that direction. Just like
improvements to the way we do things in Minnesota, however, were pointed out by panelists and participants.
Minnesota has the worst educational system for people of color in the United States.
Howard H. Hansen.
And there's been a lot of talk about it during the last year, but you have to get the politics out of the classroom. And it's all political.
If you want to change that achievement gap, we have to get our politicians to start compromising on some issues. And I think
challenges remain for Minnesota's minority communities, including naturalized immigrants. Gurma Hassan.
If they don't care about the political system today, what's going to happen tomorrow? Who's going to replace you guys? What kind of program you guys have to engage the minorities and the children's?
You know, we were talking about well, why aren't people of Why aren't minorities becoming more involved? Why aren't our youth becoming more involved? And I would humbly argue that that's because they don't feel like there is any possibility for them to make a difference. The partisanship and the unhonesty with a lot of our politicians has caused them to become disenfranchised. They can't.
You know, I think it's safe to say that each of the forum speakers and attendees have been frustrated with our slow and noisy political process.
But you begin the process of selecting candidates for the election. There's also going to be a straw poll.
But they have learned that it also works if you show up and get involved. That's why they showed up.
If there's a question about whether we should err on the side of access or not, we've erred on the side of access, not an exclusion. And that tradition is one I think we ought to uphold.
You know what? Everybody needs to get out and involved with the caucus.
State Senator John Hoffman.
We got to go and get involved with the caucus. That's a primary mission today, is to get involved. And also the primaries, is to get out and get the vote going. And so I think
Minnesota's precinct caucuses will be held on March 1st. That's about a month later than their traditional convening date. DFL and G.O.P. party chiefs agree that this will provide Minnesotans with a larger voice in selecting presidential candidates. And regardless of the political party you choose, the precinct caucus will put you in touch with like-minded folks from your own neighborhood. Together, you'll be selecting candidates for the state legislature and Congress. Let's again show the nation what democracy looks like.
Websites and phone numbers of the Secretary of State, Minnesota's political parties, the League of Women Voters, and the city clerk of your town can tell you the exact time and location of your precinct caucus on March 1st. Also, check your weekly community newspaper. It's all very neighborly, so let your voice and vote count.
"7 years ago, Norb Gurnis was one of the first people to appear on this phase of Democratic Visions, although he's returned from time to time to be one of the junkyard Democrats."
Hi, Jeff. How are you?
Well, Norm, good to see you.
Yeah.
What brings you over?
Well, I just thought we'd come over.
Well, Jeff, you've been producing this thing for 7 years now. The money must be pretty good.
Well, you know, Norm, we're still a public access television show, all volunteers, no pay.
Remember my first appearance on Democratic Visions? Why did you edit me so much?
Well, you know, you just weren't quite ready for Charlie Rose or Tom Hauser.
You know, Straight, we have made DFLers and progressives look pretty darn good.
Yeah, someone's got to cover their backs, and we couldn't have done it without Tim.
Democratic Visions can be seen 24/7 on YouTube. That's Democratic Visions YouTube.
That's all for now. We'll see you next time.
Democratic Visions is independently crafted by volunteers, mostly Democrats, from Eden Prairie, Minnetonka, Edina, and Bloomington.